From KAMR Local 4 News, your local election headquarters, this is Politics Today.
Years after the idea was funded, the Panhandle State Hospital is closer to being open. We'll head to that groundbreaking ceremony. And Lieutenant Governor of Texas, Dan Patrick, made a stop in Amarillo. We'll hear from him about the major wins and losses from this legislative session. Ground is broken on the Panhandle State Hospital, meaning it's one step closer to opening and serving the High Plains. Thanks for joining me this morning. I'm Maya Clark. This project was years in the making and an important win for a former lawmaker from this area. Here's more from the groundbreaking and how this hospital will serve our area.
Back in 2023, Governor Greg Abbott and the Texas legislature approved nearly $160 million in funding for the inpatient 75-bed psychiatric hospital, which is expected to be completed in 2027.
The selling point, or the one thing, was definitely geography, but also just underscoring and advocating that the need is no different than any other area of the state.
The Panhandle State Hospital is specifically intended to serve patients from the Texas Panhandle region.
It serves people closer to home, so when they're needing an inpatient level of psychiatric care, that's really important. So they have their support system around them to really make an impact.
Potter County Judge Nancy Tanner says every day she has a mental health hearing and she needs to send someone to the state hospital. But she says there is never a bed. So she adds the Panhandle State Hospital will be a godsend.
So we keep them at the Pavilion as long as we can. We keep them at Oceans as long as we can. Then they're eventually left out. They get released because they get on their meds, and they go right back to the same old thing, get off their meds, and they see me again. So this is going to be a godsend, literally, that we can get them into the hospital quickly.
Both Tanner and Price, who have been pushing for the hospital in the area, were excited to see the groundbreaking take place.
I feel like $1 million right now. I just feel like I really did win the lottery.
See the groundbreaking take place, to know that within a couple of years there'll be a state mental health facility right here in the Panhandle serving patients with inpatient services and really taking pressure off of healthcare providers and our county facilities. I am grateful for the opportunity to be here because it's such a fun day.
The Panhandle State Hospital is the first state-operated hospital in the 26-county area. According to the governor's office, Texas Health and Human Services Commission owns and operates 9 state hospitals and 1 residential youth treatment center for people experiencing mental illness. Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick made a stop in Amarillo last week to talk about the end of the Texas legislative session. He spoke about a lot of the high-priority items the legislature passed this last session. Patrick did put a spotlight on the changes to property taxes, making it where senior citizens have a $200,000 homestead exemption and anyone under 65 have $150,000 homestead exemption. He also addressed the concerns that school districts would be losing money because of those exemptions.
And so that you understand how this works, when we cut the property taxes, we're not taking away the money from the schools. We are paying for it. That's why it cost our budget $51 billion. We're spending $51 billion to write the check on your behalf if you're a senior or under 65 and you have a homestead. So we're sending that money back to the schools so they're not out.
The Lieutenant Governor was accompanied by State Senator Kevin Sparks for his remarks Tuesday. We've got the full press conference with the Lieutenant Governor plus the full groundbreaking from the Panhandle State Hospital. It's over at myhighplains.com. Last Saturday's election may be over, but it may be a while before we know the official results. Last weekend, the runoff election between David Prescott and Tom Sherlin resulted in a projected win by Prescott. He received 51 more votes. Over the next week or so, the votes will be canvassed. Then there is a period where a recount can be requested. If that is done, the official winner will be further delayed. We also have the winner in the runoff race for Pampa Mayor. Mike Borger won this race with 53% of the vote. Amarillo ISD is proposing a 2% raise across all pay grades in their next budget. The board met Tuesday to discuss many things, including the proposed 2025 and 2026 district budget. They also talked about how the state's funding bill will impact the district in the next year and how they expect enrollment declines to impact the district. Also, how the state's homestead exemption changes how much money they will receive. They will meet again soon to talk more about the budget. They also approved a contingent fee to a law firm. AISD would join other districts in the state for a large lawsuit against social media companies who have allegedly harmed the mental health of students. They claim these platforms are intentionally designed to be addictive and have led to more anxiety, depression, cyberbullying, and disruptive behaviors from students. This has no upfront cost to the district. The legislative session is over, and we spoke at length with Senator Kevin Sparks on a number of topics. We've got those interviews coming up next.
The 89th legislative session wrapping up. We have brought in our state senator, Senator Sparks, to talk about a few of the things that happened during this session and some of the things that maybe didn't get past the finish line. First off, let's talk about the thing that gathered a lot of attention. I know even from the last legislative session, the voucher bill finally got enough of votes. It is now into law. What can people here expect?
Yeah, so school choice, which, has been an issue now for 20 years here in the state of Texas, finally passed this session. It's basically going to take $1 billion out of the surplus to fund what we think is probably going to be roughly 100,000 students. And the first population that can apply for those funds will be either economically disadvantaged or children with disabilities.
Okay.
And, that's really what it's targeted for. It's trying to help those who don't have very many opportunities to have a better opportunity of finding an education that fits them.
And that won't kick in during this upcoming school year, 25-26, but that's more crafted toward 26-27.
That is correct, yeah. And that will be overseen by the Comptroller's Office. That time period gives the Comptroller's Office time to kind of figure out exactly the details of how they're going to manage that and oversee that. And so yeah, they've got about a year.
So not only did you guys push that across the line, you also got a huge bill through that will help funding for public schools.
Correct. The House Bill 2. And that allots about $8.5 billion additional dollars going to public education. And the way that was structured, there was a teacher pay raise, and it's actually broken down between schools with population of 5,000 or less, and then those above 5,000. The idea is that our rural teachers typically are quite a bit underpaid versus our metropolitan teachers, and so we gave them a larger allotment than we did those who are already closer to the average.
And I'm sure during this last session, you probably heard from people on both sides of the aisle. What were those rural teachers when you guys were talking about the school choice, which there's not a lot of school choice in Perryton and Stratford and Spearman and those kind of places. What did you hear from constituents?
Well, I mean, it kind of depends on what group you're talking to. When you're talking to parents, parents are generally in favor of educational choice. Right? We had 4 kids, and really each one of our 4 children learned differently. And so it's just natural for parents to want whatever education fits their child the best. From the teacher and administration, they were not as excited about it. I think part of that, I think, is because, anytime you've got change, anytime you introduce change, there's some anxiety that goes along with that.
Well, and I think it's a natural fear also of fighting for those dollars, right? I think in the public school systems of saying, hey, what about us?
Right.
Right.
Well, and that's why we felt very strongly that we needed to, one, that $1 billion is not going, it's not coming out of that typical allotment. It's coming from the other side of the ledger. But then also the additional $8.5 billion, which is, I know, the largest single increase in education funding in Texas history.
Claims in the Panhandle State Hospital. We'll have that part of the interview after the break.
let's move on. Let's talk a little bit about something that is, it doesn't matter who in Austin that I've talked to, water is of utmost concern, and you guys are working hard to address, especially with an area, Senate District 31, that relies so much on agriculture.
Right. Well, so we did. We passed Senate Bill 7, which is basically a long-term water plan. Senator Perry out of Lubbock, and of course, he represents 37 counties across West Texas. I kind of represent the other 45. Senator Perry's been looking at this, studying it for more than 10 years. What it's going to do is kind of two-pronged. One, it's going to look at infrastructure. So that's going to be money available for leaking water pipes, those kinds of things, but also pipes to be able to distribute water around the state as different areas go through droughts. The second thing, and probably the more important thing, is developing new water sources. And expect that a lot of that is going to be desalinization of brackish water.
Yeah.
And the idea behind it is if we can develop those sources, we can take the strain off of our groundwater and leave that for our agricultural needs.
Senator Sparks, another thing, and this is big news happening this week. I know this has been a long time coming. A lot of people put a lot of work into this. The groundbreaking for the Panhandle State Mental Health Hospital happening this week, and I know that is a big deal that you worked pretty heavy on. Along with, I know that For Price, back when he was in office, did a whole lot. And
yes,
this is big news for our area.
Yeah, and For, as that representative, while we were trying to secure the land and work through all of that, which ultimately we were able to, Texas A&M and John Sharp sat down with us, and we were able to work a deal out where we acquired that land on a lease from Texas A&M, a very long-term lease, which allowed us to, get started with all of our planning. For Price worked on that. John Smithy worked on that. It came about when I was still a candidate running for this position, and the lieutenant governor came to town, and we had a meeting of about 40 or so officials, and Judge Tanner said, hey, we need a mental health hospital. And to the lieutenant governor's credit, he basically said, yep, I see that need. We're going to make that happen. And he was true to his word.
Well, and I know that Judge Tanner, that has been something that has been near and dear to her heart of getting that work done. I know she put a lot of extra time. Were there any bills that didn't quite get to the finish line, or areas that I know it's 2 years away now, but something that you're looking forward to of the next session? We got to jump into that.
Yeah, I mean, there are a number of them. One that my staff worked on quite a bit was a grid firming bill. The ERCOT, the grid that supplies the power to 2/3 of the state of Texas right now is 35 to 40% dependent on wind and solar, and 90% of what's in the queue with the Public Utility Commission to be built over the next 5 years is more wind, solar, and batteries. All of those being intermittent power sources. And the problem that you have with that is that the wind doesn't always blow, the sun doesn't always shine, but our electrical needs are always there.
Senator Sparks will wrap up his discussion about the energy needs of our state and the legislation to make changes. That's after the break.
I had a bill that would work off of a bill that we passed previous session to continue to make sure that wind and solar had at least a certain part of the electricity they were supposed to provide If for some reason the wind didn't blow and they were expecting it to blow, that entity would have to go back and buy power to put onto the grid. That way that cost, I mean, power's got to come from somewhere, but that way that cost was not put on the consumer. It's put on the power generator, which is the way it is with all of the other power sources that we have.
So I guess at that point, that's natural gas, right?
Well, it's natural gas, it's hydroelectric, and we still have a little bit of nuclear. You know, nuclear technology, there are a lot of things on the horizon for that. It looks very promising. Obviously, they use it in other parts of the world. We've used it in nuclear submarines and aircraft carriers for 50 years.
So we could see more of that in the future.
I think we could, and the last 2 sessions, we've worked at putting some infrastructure in place so that as nuclear evolves, we're ready with a regulatory structure to oversee that.
Well, Senator Sparks, we appreciate your time. We know that you have a busy schedule, and we just are glad that you carved out some time for us here at the station today. So we appreciate you for coming in.
We'll wrap up politics today. After the break, certificates of obligation were approved twice this week. We'll talk about what they'll be used for. An update was provided on the ongoing chief search for the Amarillo Police Department. This is following the City of Amarillo's separation agreement with Martin Birkenfeld. On former chief's personal time, he wrote a letter of support to a former coach who was sentenced to decades in prison for enticement of a minor. Politics Today's Princess Bryant brings us that update.
Following the separation agreement with Birkenfeld back in February, it was announced the following month that Assistant Chief Jimmy Johnson will serve as acting chief for APD. At the Amarillo City Council meeting on Tuesday, Deputy City Manager Andrew Freeman explained that having a qualified command staff allowed the council to take the needed steps with the search process for what they call a key position.
We're not in a bad spot as far as community engagement, a lot of support for the public safety department, so I think we'll have a strong showing of support for this process, and it will bring a lot of applicants, I think, to the city.
During the meeting, it was explained to the council that 10 firms have applied to handle the chief search, and the city is now in review with one final firm.
They're trying to hire the search firm right now, so they're taking all of that data in so they can evaluate. You'll see that search firm engage in the community, and one of the first things they'll do is bring stakeholders in and create a panel in order to have some community input and engagement.
Within the next few weeks, Freeman says that they will be working to finalize the contract with the recruitment firm.
Next step in the process, which will be that community engagement piece. So we'll be heavy community engagement on the front end. The in-between piece will be that advertisement, vetting a candidate, so you won't hear as much, and then on the back end, more community engagement once we get those finalists for interviews.
We want to end up with the right chief of police for this for the city. And I don't think it has to go with any urgency, but I do think it has to be consistent.
In Amarillo, Princess Bryant, KMR Local 4 News.
Freeman adds that the city is looking to find the new APD chief by the end of the year, hopefully before or after the holidays. He says once the process is active, it is between 90 to 120 days. The Randall County Commissioners are looking to upgrade part of their Justice Center. Let's talk about 2 things that happened this week. Tuesday, commissioners approved a resolution and a notice to issue certificates of obligation. Judge Christy Dyer says the DA's office needs more space as well as expanding the grand jury room. They're also looking to eventually build another courtroom.
We use the same company that we did the last time. We have a AA rating, so we get a fair interest rate, and then we'll be able to start the construction, hopefully have it completed in 2 years. We're waiting for the design phase of it. We anticipate that will be absolutely zero impact to the tax dollar.
A notice will be published in the paper, and they'll take up this issue again in a few weeks. The Amarillo City Council approves more than $11 million in certificates of obligation. This is for street resurfacing projects across the city. The debt is for 10 years with a 3.27% rate, which is lower than expected. In April, city officials did a presentation about the projects they want to do with the certificates of obligation. That's all we have for you this week on Politics Today, but you can stay up to date on the latest political news with us this week. We'll have continuing coverage on myhighplains.com, plus check us out on Alexa and Instagram, and like us on Facebook. Thanks for joining us this morning. We'll see you next week.